This is one feature that I have not seen anyone talk about on the Panasonic S5 II. And to be honest, I think it could be a game changer. Today we are looking at the 3.3K recording mode on the Panasonic S5 II and S5 IIX. A feature that no one ever seems to talk about. I've not seen any videos about it, and even when I mentioned to Panasonic about the 3.3K mode at a recent event, even they sort of just dismissed it as not something that important. However, I actually think it's a really cool mode that we should look at and see if it could be used in a professional environment. So if you haven't seen it already, 3.3K mode, it's in there as one of the options. It gives you a 4:3 image. That's exactly what you're looking at right now. It of course does crop in, and that's our first disadvantage, shooting this mode versus absolute full frame open gate as you can do on the Panasonic S5 II. However, there are a few advantages of this as well. Obviously, you're going to have some extra reach, that may be a pro or a con. It means you can use APS-C size lenses, such as here where I was using the Sigma 18-35 with an adapter. Being cropped in on the sensor, it also unlocks the higher frame rates as well, which is incredibly useful to have. Rather than being limited just to 25 and 30 frames like you are if you want to shoot in 6K mode, suddenly now you can have an open gate look or a full square sensor look with 50 frames or 60 frames per second possible. That's great if you're looking to do some slow motion with the S5 II. You'd have had to crop anyway if you were shooting in a 4K mode. That would have gone to an APS-C size sensor, just like this. But instead of using the processing power of the camera to give you some extra width, you're actually gaining extra height instead. Now, believe it or not, even though it's called 3.3K mode, you're not actually losing out on any resolution. The number of pixels that you've got in the frame in total is actually the same as when you're shooting in 4K. The difference is the distribution of those pixels. When you're shooting in APS-C 4K, you've got 3,840 pixels by 2,160. When you shoot 3.3K mode, you do lose some width, so now you're on 3,328 pixels, but you gain height, so now you're on 2,496. Well, what does this all mean? Well, both actually shoot 8.3 million pixels across the entire image. It is just the distribution that has changed in terms of the pixels that are being used. So with that in mind, in theory, the sharpness of the image and the processing and everything should be very similar in this mode as it is to shooting in a 4K crop. Other than the frame rates, why else would you choose to shoot in this cropped 3.3K mode over the full 6K open gate? After all, surely that is the better option. First off, you're going to have slightly smaller file sizes because you're not dealing with so many pixels, and often you just don't need 6K. That is a lot of resolution to work with, and yeah, maybe if you're doing heavy crops, that's handy, but generally that's way more than you actually need. With 3.3K mode, as I mentioned, you still have the right number of pixels. The other advantage is the fact that actually it's 4:3 rather than 3:2. So you actually have more height than you do if you're shooting in open gate. This just really helps with framing for different outputs that you might be doing, such as 9:16. Now, I did think the rolling shutter would also improve because you're using less of the sensor. However, after several different tests and playing around with different settings, it seems to be that the rolling shutter is pretty much the same in 3.3K mode as it is in 6K, which is a bit of a shame. What I would say looking at this mode is definitely try it out. Definitely use it with your camera, and I think it's more than good enough to use with your clients. The reality is we're mostly delivering in 1080p, whether it's vertically or widescreen. That is how we end up shooting nearly all the time. They don't really want the large 4K files unless there's a specific need for it. Often when it's just online or for internal stuff, actually 1080p is more than enough. So that's why I think 3.3K mode could be a very useful mode to use, because it means you can now do all your vertical and widescreen content using a single mode in the camera. And maybe it's leaning a little bit more towards that vertical content as well. You're going to frame up more with vertical in mind, which is probably a good thing because you're training your mind in the right position. We don't want to be doing vertical. I understand it, it's frustrating, but it is the reality of work nowadays in the industry. And still being able to shoot with the camera the normal way around, not having to tilt on its side, not having to use any crazy rigs to give you a vertical image or an image that you can turn vertical easily, I think it's a huge advantage, and it's nice to be able to use a camera in that mode. And of course, if you need the widescreen, then you can just crop the different way instead. Now with cool features like this, do I think I will replace my Sony FX3, which doesn't have any sort of open gate mode and certainly doesn't have any sort of resolution to crop in like this anyway? Well, I think that's a video for another day. So make sure you like and subscribe if you want to watch that one.